everyone. This is the first video, which is a more in-depth explanation of my story. The purpose of these videos will be to document my journey pre-transplant, post-double lung transplant, and help inform parents, families, and friends, or whoever, of what everyday struggles someone who is terminally ill or living with a disease like mine has to face, as well as help some decide if transplant is something they would want to pursue. This has been a lifelong battle for me. In my early years, I had to endure numerous surgeries. I had multiple lung biopsies, which is what they used to identify my disease. From the biopsies, they were able to see a buildup of scar tissue on my lungs, and originally doctors thought I was having acid reflux as a baby, thus causing the scarring in the lungs. They did a surgery called a fundoplication, which is where they tie the stomach a certain way to reduce or eliminate the reflux, but it didn't fix the problem. At some point, the doctors were able to deduce that my white blood cells were detecting my lungs as a foreign virus and attacking them, which was the cause for the scar tissue. Doctors classified my disease as interstitial lung disease, and because of the way the disease works, when I was younger, things were easier in a sense. There were still things I couldn't do, but being a child, it didn't really affect me. The biggest issue I ran into, that is still a problem even now, is that I would exhaust myself easier than kids my age who are classified as normal. And I knew I was at the doctor's more than other kids, and occasionally I'd have to go take a nap in like the nurse's office because I'd be too tired, or I'd have terrible migraines from the different medications I was taking. And the school I was attending at that point in time was understanding of my situation. The only real issue I ever had was when I had to participate in PE. I would get extremely sharp pains in my sides, and the teacher didn't really understand my situation, so it was a constant struggle with him. And I think the part of the problem was he'd see me at recess and I'd be fine, but that's because even as a young kid, I knew my limits and could rest and take it easy when I needed to. As I got older, things started to slowly change. I was constantly doing 6-minute walk tests and pulmonary function tests, so the doctors could keep a close eye on how my lungs were performing. And in about 3rd grade, I was getting steroids to help reduce the inflammation or cool the inflammation in the lungs. And they would do that through an IV, and it was every month for 3 days. And the side effects from the medication were more intense than the other medications I was on. I'd get terrible migraines for days after the treatment, and the steroids make you get frustrated easier, and I didn't really handle it as well as a kid. It made it a lot harder to consistently attend school, and by the 4th grade I was homeschooled, which I was homeschooled up until about 7th grade. 7th grade was difficult for multiple reasons. I had an ultrasound and a heart catheter done during that time, and it showed there were high pressures and swelling in my right side of my heart. And when I would do a lot of physical activities, I could feel my heart rate. Even now, if I do anything, my heart rate shoots way up and it doesn't feel good. And because of this, it was the first time that they really mentioned needing a lung transplant. And one of my doctors was very persistent on me getting it. But at that time I didn't feel like I needed it, and so I told him no, which he really didn't appreciate. But it was this point in time when they brought to my attention the gravity of my situation and what it meant to be considered terminally ill. And on top of that, it was when they first put me on oxygen, requiring me to wear it 24/7. And being a rebellious teenager, it was always a fight trying to get me to wear it. Just because I wanted to be normal, and I felt like that the oxygen put a beacon over my head saying, hey, look at me, I'm different. But I mean, even without it, kids already knew there was something wrong with me for, I'm sure, multiple reasons. You know, I'd go to the nurse's office because I'd be exhausted or have headaches, and I'd miss days and days at a time from the medications. And I mean, even afterwards, trying to just deal with the side effects of the medications. And I didn't make it through the whole year just because it became too much physically, and I wasn't wearing my oxygen at the time. I may have been able to make it through if I had worn my oxygen early on, but I don't know. For 8th grade, I tried to attend school again, but this time with the oxygen, and I didn't really have a choice to wear it at this point. And for the most part, the school was accommodating. I did have one teacher who thought I was faking my whole illness, which was pretty ironic because she was the health teacher. And I mean, some of the kids were mean, of course, just to, you know, be mean, I guess. I don't know. And it did get to me sometimes, but in 8th grade, I did have a lot of good friends who stood by my side no matter what. And for the most part, a majority of the people there already knew who I was. I did face like a little discrimination for the first time. I was taking theater class at the time, and the theater teacher wouldn't give me any significant roles because she said to me that physically I can't do it. And so she would always just put me as a background character, which was a little disheartening, but I did leave theater in school, and I went and joined all-inclusion theater called Dionysus, which is for people who are handicapped as well as non-handicapped. And that was a great experience, and even now when I'm able to help out, I still go and volunteer occasionally. I still had the issues of being in and out of school, and it made it hard to keep up academically. So I was behind starting out, and then I kept falling further behind. And even with the oxygen, I was still exhausting myself. And I would have to stay home just to recover. I think that may be the hardest part for people to grasp, because anyone who knows you thinks of you as normal, or denies the fact that there's something wrong with you. And they think because you act and look normal and healthy, you should feel fine. And they don't really understand that everything you do takes so much energy from you. I mean, breathing itself is an exercise that uses up all your energy. And on the other side of things, you know, some people think since you feel terrible, your outside should reflect that, so you should look terrible too, which isn't really the case. I mean, looking how you feel would make it difficult to keep your spirits up, and it's always good to make the best out of your situation and hope people understand and accept what you have to go through daily. I've had a lady yell at me for parking in a handicap spot because I could walk. That was her reasoning. And I did have my oxygen at the time, so she could clearly see it. And she yelled at me because her husband had a broken leg and she felt he needed it more than I did. And I mean, I'm not gonna say he didn't, he could have, I don't know. But I mean, I can walk and I do look fine besides the oxygen. But the simple task of walking from my car to the entrance of a restaurant causes my oxygen levels to fall into the low 70s, even 60s, which increases my heart rate significantly. And for normal people, their oxygen levels are usually 98 to 100%. And that's where they should be. So when they plummet that low, it's really not a good thing at all. And I think sometimes it's hard for parents to understand that as well. I don't think they realize how taxing it can be walking to and from classes when you're doing it on a daily basis. It's like trying to make it through your day breathing through a straw with no break. And some parents may let their child stay home to recover, but you know, then their kid is able to adequately rest up and begin to act as normal as they can. So then the parents get the idea that they sometimes think their kid is faking, and they'll see the same behavior on the weekends. But it kind of goes back to looking fine but feeling like crap. I mean, when everyone's home for the weekend, you don't really want to bring everyone's mood down, and you don't want to miss out on anything. You want to be able to spend time with everyone. So you try to make the best of it, and you push yourself to participate, which kind of throws you into a loop because then you exhaust yourself again. And I know it's always been a struggle between my mom and I when I was younger. And eventually we were able to get my schedule at school changed. So I was going Monday, Wednesday, Friday from morning to lunch. This was in 8th grade. And it did help a bit, but I did go back to homeschooling because it was easier and I didn't have to explain to the other kids why my schedule was the way it was and how I got it changed. And personally, I didn't like being homeschooled. Some kids do well in homeschooling environments, and it is a good way to keep exposure from viruses down, but you do miss out on a lot of social aspects that you get when you're in school, which is what I really wanted. I think in the early years it's okay to homeschool, but for like middle school and high school, I wouldn't suggest it, and I mean, that's just my opinion. I would have loved to, like, you know, go to prom or different social events that people got to do in high school that I missed out on. And that may be just because I didn't get to have the experience. And so for high school, I was homeschooled just for 9th grade. But after that, I kind of gave up on school, which I don't suggest to anyone. But the year I was supposed to graduate, I did go and get my GED, which was somewhat of an accomplishment, I guess. And after that, I waited a semester before attending community college because with a GED and no SAT scores, I couldn't apply to any universities. And at this point, I was much older and could deal with the ups and downs of life easier versus when my adolescent self was attending school. My first semester, I took 12 hours, and I made sure my schedule was spaced out so I could go to and from class efficiently. or even take a nap between my classes if I needed it. Which I did in fact need throughout the semester, so I had enough energy to make it through the day. Things went well my first semester. I only had like one incident with a teacher who said surgery wasn't a good enough reason to miss an exam. So that was unfortunate, but it worked out in the end. You know, every semester I would just explain my situation to the teachers and how I may be in and out of class or may miss because I have doctor's appointments constantly. And the teacher were understanding. Like I said, that there was that one teacher. That was pretty much it. And once I finished all my core classes, I applied to several universities, and I got into my number one choice, which was Texas A&M. But for me, at this point, I was already pushing myself too far to go to school, and I completely exhausted myself, and I got extremely sick. I ended up getting the flu, and then on top of that, I got an infection which progressed to my lungs, which made my disease progress further. And I'm still recovering from it. It's hard for the doctors to tell me whether or not I'll be back to my baseline of what I was before I got sick. But they're hopeful that I can. And by my last semester at school, I could really tell that things weren't going well. And I continued to push myself because getting a degree is something that I wanted to accomplish. And by March of the spring semester, just walking from the couch to the bathroom would drain me of any energy I had. And I ended up in the hospital. And, you know, that's when they found out that I had an infection and it did spread to my lungs. I had to drop a few classes, but one of my teachers said that I could stay in her class. I would just have to come to the final, or come to the class for the final, because for the most part, everything we were doing was online, and we'd meet in the classroom once a week. And my cousin was taking the class as well, so if I needed any information, I could ask her. And I did make it through the class, which was very helpful. I was glad I was able to get that out of the way. And after that semester, I did, like I said, I did get into A&M, but I couldn't attend A&M because it's physically too much for me to do now and then. Which is why I started to seriously think about getting a lung transplant. And there are other aspects of my life that my disease has affected. I have to rely on my parents more so than other individuals my age. And being able to commit to a job is difficult because of constant doctor's appointments, as well as simple task of finding someone willing to hire you. And on top of that, a job can be just as taxing as school was for me, which would put me back in the same situation of being too exhausted. I did get a seasonal position at GameStop just so I could get out of the house, and I was only required to work once a week, so it was fine while it lasted. But I'd like to, be able to move out and get some independence back but at the moment it's not plausible. And because I was homeschooled most of my life, I played a lot of video games. Um, Mostly online games, just so I could get some type of human interaction. Because even if the people were virtual avatars, they were still real people playing them. And playing games was, it was somewhat helpful for me because I got to essentially be someone else and no one knew I was sick with anything unless I decided to tell them. It was a nice way to get out of reality. And I also met some people who I consider to be close friends that I still keep contact with, which is good, I guess. Another part of my life that's been affected greatly is preserving friendships and relationships for a multitude of reasons. My issue has always been, and still is, that I don't want people getting close to me because I didn't think I'd be around for a long time. And I didn't want someone to have to go through the pain of losing someone if it could have been avoided. So in the end, I decided relationships and friendships weren't worth the trouble. And I mean, now that I'm older, I realize how flawed that thought process is. But it's a very difficult thing for me to change. And I mean, if I'm interested in a girl, I might try and pursue her, but I end up convincing myself it's not worth it one way or another. I mean, for example, my latest excuse is that it's pointless to get involved because I'm moving to San Francisco. And I'm sure if I met someone in San Francisco, my excuse would be, don't get involved because you're moving back to Texas after all this is over. And as for friends, I do have some that aren't a part of my family, but not too many. I can't really stay over at friends' places because my oxygen bottles don't last that long, and the machines that give me enough oxygen are very large and hard to transport without lots of planning. And I'm self-conscious about how loud it is. I don't know, you can probably hear it right now. And I don't really make new friends because of what I said earlier. And I am working on changing that part of me, but it is a slow process. And despite everything, I have always done my best to stay in high spirits and be as positive as possible that things will work out the way they're supposed to. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I never faced depression, but I've never let the depression consume me. And I've had the chance to do a lot of awesome and fun things. I mean, for my Make-A-Wish, I got to visit BioWare, which is a game development studio. And, I've been to Disney World and Universal Studios. And, I mean, I couldn't ride all the rides, but it was still a fun thing to do. I got to go to Vegas for Sony Fanfare, which is a video game conference. And it's just different things like that. And I'd say I've had the chance to do a lot of things that people, whether they're healthy or sick, don't get to do. And I'm very fortunate for that. And so I guess in the end, those are the kinds of things I've had to deal with throughout my life. And I'm not saying everyone who has a disease or terminal illness is like this, because I know a few who are very outgoing, whereas I'm more of an introvert. And this just happens to be my story. And hopefully documenting this journey that I'm about to go through can help someone who has to walk a similar path make their decision if they want to go through a transplant or whatever they decide. And I guess that's pretty much it. If you've made it through the video, just make sure to subscribe to get updates. The other videos will probably have more footage of the doctor's visits and the different tests that I have to go through. Things have been really busy, so I haven't really gotten around to filming those processes, but there are more tests that I'll have to go through very soon. So feel free to ask questions through comments or message me, and I'll do my best to respond in a timely manner. Hopefully I can get another video up soon. And I'd also like to give a big thank you to everybody who has donated to the GoFundMe, and for those who will donate to the GoFundMe. We are planning on going to San Francisco soon. It'll be an extremely helpful thing to just, share the GoFundMe even if you can't donate. And thank you for watching. Just have a great day.